Hi, everybody. My name's Jeff. I'm a SME and also a coach who works with people in the construction industry.
Hey everyone, I'm Rochelle. I'm a proposal management consultant in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry.
And this,
Is Burnout Banter. There's only one resource that all of us have the same amount of every day: time. Why is it that most of the people I interact with don't feel like they have enough of it? And at the same time, somehow, many of the people that society sees as successful have cultivated a strategic and disciplined relationship with time. They recognize that time is a finite resource that should be protected and understand the importance of using it wisely to achieve their goals. In our fast-paced world, it's all too easy to find ourselves overwhelmed by the constant demands on our time and attention. But what happens when we struggle to effectively manage this precious resource? How does our mismanagement of time lead us down the slippery slope towards burnout? Join us as we untangle the complex relationship between time management and burnout. We'll explore practical strategies for reclaiming control of your schedule, nurturing healthier habits, and ultimately either preventing burnout before it has a chance to take hold or overcoming it if it has already sunk its teeth into you. So grab your favorite beverage, find a cozy spot to relax, and join us as we embark on this journey to understand the intricate interplay between time management and burnout. And today we are joined by special guest Andrew Hartman, a time coach for individuals and companies and founder of Time Boss, a company focused on helping time-strapped business leaders wrangle chaos, optimize their time, and avoid burnout. Welcome, Andrew.
Awesome. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Rochelle. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I am Rochelle for everybody who's listening,
and I'm Jeff.
and this is Burnout Banter. Before we jump into today's episode, remember to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen so that you can stay up to date with the latest banter. So, Andrew, again, welcome. We are so excited to have you on board, and I just spent forever talking. So I would love to hear a little bit about you and how you got here and how Time Boss came around. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Rochelle. Yeah, again, so grateful to be here. Appreciate time with you all. Yeah, so my background is in early stage companies and mostly software companies. And if you know anything about early stage software companies, they love to just chew people up and spit them out. Burnout's just part of the deal. It's the tax on the success we're trying to drive. So this all started for me when I was 27. I was working at a marketing technology agency, had a bunch of clients who were all demanding my time, had a boss who was demanding my time, had no systems, and I just was utterly overwhelmed with stress, fear, and anxiety all the time. It was my waking experience and my sleeping experience. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, pull out a Post-it, scribble some notes, just trying to get things out of my head, wake up in the morning, look at the scribbles and be like, I don't even know what I was writing down. You know, it was such a mess. All of this culminated after a couple years or so with me actually losing my sense of smell for 6 months. I was so stressed out that it caused the psychosomatic response of losing my sense of smell for 6 months. It was terrible. I'm a foodie. I love to eat. So you can imagine. Yeah, it's the brain will do, or the body will do amazing things to get your attention when you're going sideways. And mine was to lose my sense of smell. So
I
that was the
can't
first.
say I can't say that I've heard that one before.
It's you will hear all. I mean, people have hot flashes. They'll have numbness in their limbs. There's so many ways that stress expresses itself in our body, and it's really our body. It's the flashing lights on the dashboard saying you must change. This is not sustainable. So for me, it was really the first flashing light. I had young kids. I had a marriage that I wanted to keep and gratefully have kept with my wife, Kelly. And I just had to start making change. And so Time Boss I wasn't trying to solve anyone else's problems. I was trying to survive. You know, it was very practical. Uh, and so that was really the beginning of heading this direction. And when it first started, it was just about wrangling the chaos. It was, how do I make sense of all the things coming at me? And so ironically, I got really, really good at managing my time and going fast, but I didn't have boundaries in place to keep me from burning out. So if anything, I actually accelerated the burnout by being better and better at organizing all the chaos. I didn't change anyone's expectations of what they could expect from me. I just got better at getting the stuff done and had my last major burnout in 2016. finished a major project, utterly burnt out, called my boss and said, I can't do this. I think I'm done. He was an amazing man, really helped me kind of unpack and recover. And I was able to come out of that. But what I realized is I have to create a boundary where it's not just about making massive impact, but it's also about my peace and my connectedness to the work I'm doing, where stress, fear, and anxiety are not the fuel that are going to drive my activity, but a deep belief and connectedness to the work where burnout is no longer acceptable. Stress, fear, and anxiety is no longer acceptable in the model. And that's when change started to happen. That's when I started going fast while experiencing that deep sense of peace. People started leaning in and being like, what are you doing? This is very different. I was still in early stage companies, so I'm still around people that are frying themselves all the time, and I wasn't. And the teams that I led weren't, and we were making big things happen. And so people started leaning in and asking more and more, and eventually it led to me launching coaching groups to help people understand how I manage my time. And the reason why I led to coaching groups is I just had to help people get past the friction. It's really hard to change. It is really, really hard to change our habits related to time. And so getting people into some kind of accountable relationship, people that worked for me had to do it because I made them do it, but getting into some type of accountable relationship with other people to make change is often really the only way to make change. So to answer your question, Rochelle, that's where Time Boss came about, and that's why we're here today.
A lack of enjoyment of food.
Yeah, I must enjoy food. How do I overcome this?
If that's your motivator, like that would be
We
very
all
motivating to
got.
me. I can't imagine.
Ugh, totally. It was brutal. It was brutal. And I had a wife who said, "Hey, like you are emotionally not here. Like what is going on? We can't run our family this way." And I think a lot of people experience that. They shut their laptop, but they don't shut off their brain, and evenings aren't restful. They're physically present with their family or in their community or whatever, but they're mentally everywhere else, back at work, back in the office. So
I think I've told Rochelle this, but I at a kind of a turning point for me, um, I came home from a really stressful day, or it had been a really stressful period of time, and my wife said something, and I made the comment that I don't have the bandwidth to deal with your problems. All I do is deal with people's problems at work all day. And
oh, how'd
as
that
you
go,
can
Jeff?
imagine, that was not well received. So
Uh,
yeah, that's the point that we get to where we're just fried.
yeah, absolutely.
So how does time management and burnout kind of relate in your mind? Or why does poor time management lead so easily to burnout?
Yeah, it's interesting. A use case or analogy I often share with people is if you think about whenever you start your current job, first day you show up on the job and someone hands you something to do, and you're like, absolutely. I'm a time millionaire. I've got all the time in the world. Like I can absolutely do that. And you say yes, and then you get another one, and you say yes, and you get another one, you say yes. And where we get into trouble is we never really do the work to understand our true capacity. And so we have a really, really, really fuzzy sense of what our capacity is. And it tends to be driven by our feelings. Like you just described, Jeff, you came home and your wife asked you for one more thing, and you're like, I don't have it. Like there's nothing left in the tank. So in that way, you were discovering your capacity via feel, right? You hadn't, your wife didn't know that you were at capacity. You may not even know you're at capacity, but you found it by that additional request. And I think that's how most people get into trouble. They don't do the work to understand their true capacity. And so they're kind of feeling their way through their schedule. And where we get into overwhelm is typically what happens is, let's say we can get done realistically 5 things in a day, 5 big things that we might be able to move forward. And you could quibble about 3 or 8. It doesn't really matter. Let's say you can do 5. Most people think they can do 8. And so they're overloading themselves. They don't have realistic expectations. And so they get to the end of their day and they shut their laptop and they don't say, man, I just crushed 5 things. They say, I didn't get to those 3 things. And they take those things home, and those things are running. They're open loops that are running in their head at night and as they sleep and when they wake up the next morning. And the insidious thing is they take those 3 things, they shove them into tomorrow, and then they plan to do 8 things again. So they never solve their capacity. So every day you end the day with more to do than you had time to do it. And you run that tape long enough, and the language turns into, I'm a failure. There's not enough time. I can't keep up. Those become identity statements, and you just over time wear down to the point where you snap. There's just nothing left. And then your spouse, like you shared, Jeff, or your kids or your neighbors or your church or whoever comes and asks for your time, and you're like, I got nothing. There's nothing here. And that only increases that spiral, that doom spiral of, gosh, I'm a prisoner at work. I don't have enough time. There's no emotional energy. I'm not present with my kids. And that, if you're not changing your habits, if you're not changing the source of the overwhelm, you're just going to nosedive. And in the story you tell yourself about your work and about your life and all those things just go utterly sideways. And I think that's when people finally break and burn out.
Yeah, or they get to the point where they don't care.
Yes.
They're okay with the outcome, right? Like it's almost like I give up, whatever happens, happens. I can't do this anymore.
That's why I call it time prison. Like you no longer are claiming agency in the scenario. You're literally just a prisoner, and the prison's going to tell you when to show up and when to sit in your jail cell and when to leave, and you have no control. And it's a total lie. We are 100% responsible for what we get from our calendars and from our time. But I think burnout leads us to the point where we just kind of declare bankruptcy, and we're like, I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to change, and I try every hack I see on LinkedIn and they don't work. So what do I do? So
yeah, I switched jobs, and then I feel better for a little while.
Yeah, I took a 2-week vacation.
Repeat the same thing over again.
Yeah, I just took that 2-week vacation. I sat on a beach for 2 weeks. I'm going to be great now. It's like, bro, you are just about to spin back up. It's just a matter of time.
So what are some?
Always,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to chime in because I'm going through this exercise right now where I'm like, I'm pretty sure a proposal takes me like this many hours. And then I'm consistently surprised when it takes me longer than that. I'm like, what is happening? I've been doing this for 15 years. You think I'd know how long it takes to do this? And I was talking to some of my other proposal colleagues, and they're having the same like epiphanies where we're like, I could totally knock out like an outline in a day. That's fine. Like I've done it before. But we're only remembering like that one time we had a really easy proposal where we were able to knock it out in a day, and it actually takes longer. So we're telling ourselves these crazy stories about our best moments and using those as like the baseline. And it's very detrimental.
It really is. It really is, because, it's time is time's a fundamental law of the universe. You can't change it. And yet we, like in your situation, Rochelle, when you approach that, the thing you tell yourself is, I should be able to do this longer, or shouldn't take this long, or because you said it was going to take 6 hours and it takes 8 hours, you now have a judgment statement about yourself and your relationship with time. And so, though it is this fundamental principle, we end up telling ourselves really wacky stories about it, and then that in turn, again, those quickly shift into identity statements where I don't know how to navigate time, or I'm not in control of my time, or whatever the case may be. And I think that's when you repeat that loop long enough and you end up in some pretty wacky places.
Yeah, and I think you can tell me if it's the same in software, but in construction, right? Like we're judged by how many hours you can work.
Right. 100%.
And I was just having this conversation today of like, I don't really care how many hours somebody works. I care about what they get done. So if we're just using the quantification of, well, they worked 50 hours or they worked 45 hours as a judgment, it kind of sets us up to look at that person in a way that may not be applicable to them.
Yeah, I think it takes strong leadership to say we're here for outcomes, not for butts and seats. So COVID was a great equalizer in software. It dispersed us to the masses. Remote work became the norm in software. And in that model, your only option is outcomes, because I can't tell if you're sitting there all the time. It's not even in my best interest to try to figure out if you're sitting there all the time. Construction is harder. Obviously, there's a lot more physical presence required. But I do think good leaders will flip into outcomes where we strategically agree on the outcomes we're trying to drive. And I mean, in some ways, you should spend as little as time possible as needed to drive those outcomes. It's almost prudent. Why would we commit more resources to something if we can get the outcome in half the time? But it takes strong leadership to think of it differently.
What are some blind spots that we have that kind of set us up to mismanage our time? Or
oh my gosh. Let's see. How much time do you have? Number one, I already said, is capacity. People just have no clue what their actual capacity is, and so they're feeling their way through it. And so they're constantly overwhelming themselves, ending the day focused on all the things they didn't get done. versus having realistic capacity to make, the most important things happen.
I worked for a company that did Kanban. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's
Yeah.
kind of Toyota. And it was pretty eye-opening to think about, okay, I've got 8 hours. These are my tasks. These are how long that I think they're going to take me. And typically the number you could fit into that 8 hour period was way less than what you would try to fit in on a normal.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think one of the other blind spots that's really significant is people are constantly oscillating between being their own boss and being their own employee. And so the way that looks is you start working on a project and then you glance at your to-do list and see the other 10 things that you're not currently working on. You think, oh, shoot, is this the most important thing? Maybe I should switch to that. Oh, you know what? I'm going to call that guy real quick. They switch to that. They work through that. And they glance through their list again and they do it. And so they're constantly oscillating back and forth between their being their own boss and being their own employee, either deciding what to work on or actually working on the thing. And I think it creates tremendous stress. Like that task switching literally builds up a chemical residue in your brain. Like you can't perfectly flush out that context. You're booting up that context every time you switch tasks. And over time, the real-time effect is if you smoked a joint or missed a night of sleep. Like it has such an impact on your ability to focus. And so I think if people can become disciplined at separating out when they plan and prioritize versus when they make something happen, that alone can create so much freedom. That's the whole idea of the name Time Boss came from that. You are literally the time boss of your future self. And so we're going to create really simple habits to have time where you're the boss and then time where you're the employee and you make it happen. I think the last one I would say in terms of blind spots is people just accept stress, fear, and anxiety as the tax on the results they're getting. And they just allow it to happen. And they're not creating firewalls in their life that says, man, I am wrecked by stress, fear, and anxiety right now. What is going on inside me? Like what feelings are downstream from like thoughts and core beliefs. And I think if you create a boundary for yourself of, I'm not going to let stress, fear, and anxiety run my life. When you do that, it requires you to go upstream and look at your thoughts and core beliefs and saying, what am I believing about myself or life, or that I have to be 100% available all the time to everyone in my world, or I'm a failure? Like, what are those fundamental beliefs that are sending me sideways here? And what do I need to do some work on? I think that's probably a core blind spot people have when it comes to their relationship with time.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I specialize in is fear. And you know, we can't get rid of fear, but we can bring awareness to when it's trying to show up and
Yeah,
the ways we react when it's
right.
showed up.
100%.
And then from that place of awareness, we can decide whether we are going to listen to that or not. And, we can disprove what it's telling us about ourselves
That
and
is,
remind ourselves who we really are instead. And then we get to make a different decision than when fear is making the decision for us.
Jeff, that is so good. So good. The analogy that I share, I used to be deathly afraid of flying. And when turbulence would start, I would become very afraid and I would become very stiff, as if like my stiffness was going to keep the plane held up in the air or something, you know? And so the fear was real. Like it wasn't that the fear was not real, it was very real. But the core belief leading to that fear was totally sideways. Millions of planes take off and land every year and don't crash. The reality is flying is very safe. So I had a core belief that was fundamentally wrong that was leading to deep fear. And the only way I moved past my fear of flying was just that reminder of just telling myself, you are experiencing turbulence on a plane that is not crashing. And so I had to claim a different core thought to experience a different life. And time is no different. We tell ourselves these lies that there's not enough time. And so because there's not enough time, we feel anxious and stressed and whatever. And when we feel anxious and stressed, we just keep working. We open our laptop from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. and just try to knock out email. We skip dinner with our family. We don't work out in the morning because we're too tired or we're stressed out. And so the wrong response is to deny the feeling. The right response is to acknowledge the feeling and look upstream at the thought or core belief and say, what is driving this? To what you said, Jeff's perfect. Is this true? Or do I need to embrace a different thought? I love that. That's the exact right way to think about it.
And I also think time is one of our greatest excuses, or a lack of time is one of our greatest excuses. And we kind of use it as a comfort blanket to prove why I don't have this thing in my life or why I can't
Right.
get this done. Or instead of looking at really what the reason is, we use time as kind of this catch-all to protect ourselves in some way.
Right. And most people are stuck in the mid-sentence, they're deep in their job. They don't necessarily have that fresh start. They don't have the empty calendar in front of them to perfectly architect it. And so all they feel are the overwhelming expectations of the next 2-week period. I joke that we just kind of carry this sonic boom of time with us, of like tasks and expectations and what my boss wants, what my clients wants, and what the architect wants or whatever. And so it's challenging for us to make change in the midst of that sonic boom because we just think like, well, I can't block time tomorrow because I already am in back-to-back meetings all day long. And so sometimes it's truly disarming a bomb, layer by layer, unpacking their time habits and helping create some margin for them to make change. Otherwise, they're just so caught in that fear, stress, anxiety cycle, they'll never get out. There's no room. There's no margin for them to even consider it to be different.
Sure. And I think that's a place where a lot of people want to stay too.
Well, one thing I often
It's
joke is
comfortable.
I think people are addicted to anxiety too. You know what feels really good is putting out a fire. If my house is on fire and I get my fire hose and I put it out and my whole house doesn't burn down, I feel like a total hero. And so people become so addicted to the relief of anxiety that they just point themselves at the hottest fire after the hottest fire after the hottest fire after the hottest fire because I mean everyone is rewarded for putting out the fires, and so we settle into that as a habit and we get enough strokes and we just don't know how to do it any different. So
How do we break that? Like, as a consultant, my entire life is coming to someone's rescue. They're like, hey, Rochelle, we've got this RFP. It's due next week. We can't handle it internally. Can you save the day? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I can totally save the day, even though I don't want to and I can't, but I feel obligated to. And also, yes, I get that little high of like, I saved the day for you.
right.
How do I break that? How do my marketers break that?
So there's a concept in Time Boss that I mean, this kind of goes back to a blind spot that I really recommend for people. So a lot of people, everyone knows the time block. Not everyone. It's a growing understanding that you should take items on your to-do list and put them on your calendar, map them there. Where people often go sideways is they block their entire day, 100% of their time. And it's totally unrealistic because the reality is chaos, life. Everything's coming for us, right? Like we're often banging into each other with our priorities, trying to get things done. And so one thing I recommend to people, I strongly recommend is only planning out 60% of their time and leaving 40% open for what I call whirlwind, which is just the reality of life. Emails, phone calls, drop-ins, clients call and they need a last second proposal. It's almost like inter-week budget for you to deal with reality. And what's powerful about that, most people fight me on that. They say there's no way. I have to plan my whole day. There's no way I could do 40% of time. But what's magic about that time is it's kind of like this virtual buffer that if you don't need, you can, if you care about the work that you're doing and you don't need that virtual buffer, you can simply slot things in. So if I show up to my whirlwind time and now, I'm up to date on my email, nobody's asking for anything, Slack or Teams doesn't have any requests, I can literally go to tomorrow, whatever's prioritized tomorrow, just grab it and keep working. So in your case, Rochelle, one way that I might approach that is if it is a strategic priority for you to be responsive to your client needs, I might literally plan responsive time into your week where you're not overly adding burden on yourself. But if you don't need it, collapse it. So if I don't need it on Monday, I'm going to collapse it. I'm going to grab the next item on my list and I'll work on it. If I don't need it Tuesday, I'm going to collapse it, grab next time. Wednesday, I absolutely need it. I need it Wednesday to Friday. Awesome. You plan for it. It's not a 3-alarm fire. You could slot it right in. And the power of that, and this is what happens to people when they go through a Time Boss cohort and they get to the end and they flip the script here is it changes the conversation from playing from behind, I'm behind, there's not enough time, to playing from the lead. If you plan to be responsive to client needs and you don't need that time and you collapse it and you're grabbing something that's on tomorrow's list and you're pulling it in today, you literally feel like a hero. You're playing from the lead. And your experience of that hour of work playing from the lead is so fundamentally different than an hour where you feel like you're behind and you're just trying to catch up. what you bring to the work, your presence, your focus, the freedom of I can just do this one thing and I don't have to think about anything else. It's totally different work. It's not the same. An hour is not an hour is not an hour. And so I really encourage people to shove that buffer into their week, plan for it, and if they don't need it, just play from the lead.
Here's the problem I've had with blocking time.
Yeah,
Is
let's get
when I
into it.
don't get other people on board with it, they don't respect my block time. And I know you mentioned boundaries before, so this might lead you to that. But I even tried with my company, because I've heard other companies that have like a whole day where it's interruption free, like we're not going to bother people,
Yeah.
get your most important work done on this day. And so I bring this idea to them and they're like, we can't, that's impossible. We can't do that. I'm like, well, there are people doing it. So it is possible, but can we start with like 3 hours? And it just went nowhere because nobody respected each other's time in that way. So I don't, that's been my challenge with block time.
So here's the way I think of it is let's say you've got two owners of your company or two partners involved in a project, and they both want 8 a.m. on Friday. You're only going to be able to give one of them 8 a.m. on Friday. And you're going to say to that person, man, I'm so sorry. I'm unable to meet at that time. I've got a meeting. I can't move. Your need's really important to me. Here's my available time on my calendar. What works for you? You'll say that because the reality is you can't be, you have a fundamental core belief that you can't be in both meetings at the same time. When we block time, we don't think of that as we think of that as a lower priority than a meeting with someone else. And so we're much more likely to give up our own block times. But the reality is, if you block that time on your calendar, it truly is a meeting with yourself. If it's important, if it's a priority, you're going to make it happen. And so if you think about that meeting on Friday morning, let's say both partners want that 8 a.m. slot. You're going to make a judgment in your heart of, okay, which of these is the higher priority, either because of the relationship or because of the task that they're asking or whatever. But you're going to make a priority decision and you're going to choose one or the other. And so I think when you time block, we just have to do the same thing and say, like, I'm so sorry, I'm unable to meet at that time. I've got a meeting, I can't move. You're literally saying the same exact thing. But hey, I understand that's really important to you. Here's my calendar when I am available. So you're showing tremendous empathy. You're not stiff arming, you're not being a jerk. You're showing tremendous empathy and you're giving them confidence that their need will be met. It's just not going to be met at the exact time that they're asking for it in that moment. And so I think reasonable people can operate that way. It's that knee-jerk response of I need it right now. I need it right now. And be like, well, you know what? We can absolutely make that happen for you. Unfortunately, I'm unavailable. But here's my available time when I can make that happen for you. And I think you got to get good at that muscle or, I mean, people are only going to come for your time. A lot of companies will just add more resources. They're like, we need more people. We're not able to get enough done. So they have more people and they're literally adding more nodes to the system that are just going to interrupt people more. And so you have to deal with the root causes or adding more people actually can oftentimes make the problem worse.
And now it's time for burning questions.
Well, this ties into my burning question, so I'm going to ask it here anyways. We're going to go out of order today. So as consultants or as marketing professionals in the construction industry, we're often at the whim of other people. So our whole job as a consultant is to serve other people.
Right.
And I have a lot of clients who don't ask, are you available? It's just, here's a meeting, or this isn't going to happen by this time. And it is one of my biggest pet peeves. But it still continues to happen over and over again. And I'm at a bit of a loss as to how to deal with that. So curious for your take on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my answer would be similar to what we just shared. I mean, two thoughts. I mean, I think Rochelle's question was similar. One, you have to decide is it your strategic priority to be available all the time? And if it is, then you should try to plan your world around it as opposed to constantly fighting it. You might think of it like a customer support agent, not to say you're a customer support agent, but customer support agent's job. Yeah. A customer support agent's job is to be responsive. So it'd be inappropriate for a company to load them up with expectations to do other things if it's their job to be interrupted, to be present for the customer, So that's one. The other I would say is, again, we all have there are situations where we would go back to, let's say that person schedules a meeting on your calendar. There are situations where we would go back to that person and say no. If our child is sick, we'll say no. If our water heater breaks and there's water running all over the floor, we'll say no. If someone that has already taken that time that truly has a higher priority or from a seniority perspective is higher, we'll say no. And the reason we'll say no is because we think we have enough evidence to say no, right? We think this is important enough to say no. I feel strong enough to say no. The reality is, like, we can say no all the time. People are always operating on incomplete information. If you say no, they're not going to come back and say, well, who are you meeting with? Why are you meeting with them? They're not even going to press. They're like, oh, Jeff's busy. Can't meet with Jeff. I wish I could meet with Jeff at that time, but I can't. But oh, wow, look at this. Jeff was very kind in his response, and he let me know all the times that he'd be available. I think, to me, in those scenarios, empathy and confidence is the most important thing. Empathetically showing that I understand that what you're asking for is really important, and confidence to know that the need will be met. It just can't be met in the exact way that they're asking. And so again, I'm a deep believer in time blocking. You as the boss of your time saying, these are the highest leverage priorities that are going to advance our strategic goals. And if someone comes and asks for that time where you've blocked for something, you just have to decide, like, is it more important or not? And if it is, you should move it. But if the meeting's not more important, then I think gently saying, I'm so sorry I can't meet. Recognize that's really important. Here's some times that will work for me. I'd love to make that happen for you. But I think you've got to have authority on your time to navigate that well.
Yeah, I think the empathy is a really important point.
Because most people just like, I got to put up boundaries. Like, no, I can't do that. Like, you're always taking my time or whatever. The reality is we're all a bunch of cavemen whose defense mechanisms are going to fly up, right? And so we're speaking to the caveman to say, like, listen, I'm not threatening you. I'm so sorry I'm unable to meet. But here are ways that I can help you make that happen. You're on the same side of the table as them. It's not a zero-sum game, where you're fighting for this hour. You're coming to the same side of the table saying, I care about the same goal you care about. Can we just try to meet that a little bit differently than that exact hour?
I want to tack on just one more question to this, because what happens with proposal professionals a lot is we are very deadline driven, right? You get a request for proposal and it's due on X date. We're not usually asked if we have bandwidth or capacity. And what happens a lot of the time is someone says, hey, here are 3 proposals. They're all due the same day. They're all priority 1. You have to get them all done, figure it out. In the frame of my time is important and I actually would love to accommodate this, but can't. Like, how do you handle that boundary where you would love to give them time, but there's just no time to give?
Yeah. Again, I think it's empathy and confidence. I think you just got to get ahead of it and be real if you don't have it. Because you're right. Like, at some point, we all hit a breaking point, either because of burnout or because there's literally not enough hours in the day. At some point I must sleep, And so I think getting ahead of it and being honest with them and saying, like, I'm so sorry, I can only do 2 or 3. I would love to make that happen for you. I have other commitments that I'm unable to do that. I think being real about that is really important. I think if there's someone that has authority over your time, so let's say in that scenario, Rochelle, you're told to do those 3, and it's a person that's also giving you 20 other things to do, which happens in every industry. I've worked for visionaries my entire life. I'm a COO operator, so people are constantly shoving things into my world. It's yes, and I absolutely, like, I get that these proposals are so important. Here are the 12 things that are on my list that are prioritized ahead of that at the moment. How would you rank those priorities? And what you're doing is very subtly, you're saying, listen, Rochelle's time is finite and valuable. You're not saying those exact words, but you're implying that. And you're creating a currency of your time that you're now offering to that key leader, right? You're saying, hey, I want to make things happen for you. Unfortunately, we are tapped on the currency of Rochelle, and we need to be very judicious about how we spend this time. How might you rank it? And whatever we rank together, I will crush. I'm with you. I'll make it happen. But again, it's that subtle boundary of you are the time boss. Like, you literally are in a seat of agency where you are deciding in sober moments, how much time am I willing to commit to this area of my life? And then based off that, provided that works with the stakeholders in your life, you're just helping them prioritize that time as currency.
I love
I
that.
also I think it's addressing the fear too of what's going to happen if I do this or say.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it goes back to your story that you're telling yourself, right?
Yeah. And
Causes.
I'm gonna tell you right now, Rochelle, just the fact that you're leading this podcast and you're on this, I mean, you are the type of person that crushes and delivers. And when I have someone on my team I trust, I'm looking for them to give me the information. I don't have all the information. And so in some ways, like your accounting, you're creating that currency helps me understand where we kind of almost settle up with you on how are we prioritizing our time. And I think if you consistently crush whatever's in front of you and you are consistently honest about your capacity, you're a value creator. There will be endless opportunity for value creators. I think it's the people that keep saying yes and then they don't follow through because they're overwhelmed. Those are the people that are going to lose opportunity. Because then you think about the key leader's needs. The key leader has a spear in their chest around getting those proposals out. And so if you say yes, but you can't actually follow through or you do a crappy job, you're actually not solving their problem. But on the front end, if they know like, oh man, with the capacity of my key team member here, I can only get two, but with confidence, those are going to be the very high quality. They just have to reorient themselves to that truth. And once they do, they're going to feel much better about delivering two high quality versions versus hoping for three and only getting one or whatever might happen. So I think you become a value creator. You're not saying, hey, for my mental health, I need to do less. That's not what you're saying. You're saying, I want to utterly crush for you. I want us to win together, but I got to figure out a way to do that where I can run at this pace forever. I can't burn out. If I burn out, it's gonna be so bad for this company. You're gonna lose me for a month while I try to recover from that. We don't burn out and fall to like 95%. We burn out and fall to like 50%, 40%. And it takes a lot to rebuild that. So I think I mean, again, we talk a lot about in the Time Boss cohort about retraining relationships. You can't make hard left turns. Hard left turns are hard for everyone. You got to slowly help people accommodate to this new version of you that is going to continue to deliver great results. They're just going to be done a little bit differently, or the way that work happens is going to be a little bit different.
I really like this shifting of perspective from a commodity to a value operator. I have a friend who talks about marketers need to become unicorns, not pack mules. And I feel like this dovetails with that thought so well. Like we're
Absolutely.
not a commodity, we're not pack mules. We're really awesome unicorns who do really awesome things, but we can only do that if we have time.
100%. I choose to give about 50 hours of my life to money making activities, to value creation activities that aren't like my family or my kids or my neighbors or my church or anything like that. So that is literally 50 units of value that I need to be judiciously thinking through what are the highest leverage things I can do to create value for all the stakeholders in my life with that time. And it's really hard to do that real time. It's really hard to do that on the fly. Like you have to create sober moments for yourself to think deeply about that in order to really commit to high leverage things and have a realistic plan that can deal with last minute proposal requests that are due next week. Because that's value as well, right? And so it's prudent for you to think if I want to deliver for my clients this way, then I need to create a system that can accommodate that when it happens and doesn't wreck the ship or send us off kilter.
I really like that you talk about peace in your workday. So do you mind sharing what peace in your workday looks like for you when you are the boss
100%.
of your time? Huh?
100%. So a couple thoughts here. One is imagine if next week, Jeff, Rochelle communicated with all the stakeholders in your life, perfectly understood your priorities and your values, crafted like the perfect calendar for you. It's well set up, deals with reality. And at 8 o'clock on Monday, you show up and you have a time block task. And all you have to do for the next 2 hours is whatever you time blocked. Like you are just fully present to that task. You trust that Rochelle's got a great system. She's planned everything for you. She's dealt with the things that don't fit. She's made sure your stakeholders are aware, and you can just be present in that task. It'd be the greatest gift. I don't even know how much that would be worth. That'd be worth so much money if I had a boss or someone in my world that was doing that. And so for me, that's what I'm trying to create with Time Boss, where when we plan for our future selves and we create structures for our future self to protect that time, we can be fully present to the task in front of us. Right now, the only thing I'm doing is spending time with you both. That's it. There are a million things on my list, in my systems, in my backlog, on my calendar over the next 6 months, a million. And I am strategically hiding all of those things from myself. And I trust my system will hold them so that I can just spend time with you guys and have a great conversation. And so to me, the first part of peace is just setting up yourself to be fully present to whatever's in front of you. This is our job right now, is to have the best conversation possible. It's not for me to be processing the emails I haven't got to. It's not for me to be thinking about whatever's after this conversation together. It's about us being here together. And to me, I think you get peace that way. The other is, we talked about it earlier, Jeff, related to fear. I think it's creating that firewall between feeling and action. And it's establishing some boundaries for yourself of, these are the feelings that I'm going to let run my day. I'm not going to let stress, fear, and anxiety run my day. They're not going to be in charge. And so as you do the work to create that firewall and you start to deal with the root, those core thoughts, a really funny thing happens. Nobody likes this. So when I was on the plane and it was turbulent and fear developed, I wanted the fear to go away. But I had to do a very roundabout thing. I actually had to go back to the core thought and tell myself, this plane is not crashing. And what I wanted to go away once I thought that is, oh, the fear's just gone. But the fear doesn't go because my body doesn't actually believe that's true, right? So I need to take action based off the thought, not based off the feeling. So the action is, I'm not going to tense up. I'm just going to sit here. I'm just going to let this plane shake. I'm going to continue to feel fear. And I'm going to constantly tell myself, this plane is not crashing. We are flying. And what happens is when you claim a thought and you act based off the thought, not based off the feeling, you actually vote for that thought to be true. James Clear talks about how our habits vote for a future self. The actions we take vote for a future self. And I think it's the same with our feelings. So, example might be my boss calls and he needs something right now. And I'm fearful and I don't want to disappoint him. And I'm just going to do it because he needs it. But I know that he's told me other things that are more important than that. So in that moment, I can either just start working because I'm afraid, or I can stop and say, you know what? At my deepest level, I want our team to be successful and I want our boss to be successful. I'm going to stop. And even though I feel fearful, I'm going to have a conversation with him about all the things he's already asked for and just double check and make sure this is the most important thing. And I may feel incredible trepidation about that. While I'm talking to him, I may be shaking because just because I claim the true thought doesn't mean the fear doesn't go away. But when I have a good conversation and I don't die, and my boss is actually appreciative of it, it votes for that core thought that I need to be making decisions on behalf of my boss, not out of fear of how he might think of me. And again, it's about doing that emotional work time after time after time to create evidence for your future self that different core thoughts are true. And this is not woo-woo. This is basic behavioral psychology. You do that long enough and you will experience peace. Yeah. I believe in my heart of hearts, there is enough time this week across all the things I'm doing because I've done the work. I believe in my system to make that true. I never say there's not enough time. That's not that language no longer enters my vocabulary. I'm not fearful about people's opinions of me because I realize that I want the best for them. So I want to speak truthfully and I want to help them understand how we can win together. Even if that might frustrate them in the moment, I believe in the long term, it will be the most loving thing. I truly believe that. And so I can have really hard conversations because I'm not afraid that it's going to impact my identity or I'm going to be bad because they think poorly of me or something. I've done the work on some really hard things that used to send me sideways so that I can experience a different life. So I think, again, coming back to your question of how do you experience peace, I think one, it's having a good plan. And then two, it's going to work on those sideways emotions and dealing with core thoughts and seeing if you can make some change there.
Yeah, I really like that. And I talk about alignment a lot, having alignment in your life. And to me, alignment is being present. Absolutely. Whatever you've chosen to do, can you just be present doing it?
Yeah. My job right now is to sit on the floor with my kids, nothing else.
Yeah.
And it's even irrational. I'm not going to respond to an email while I'm sitting with my kids, like trying to play trains or something. I'm not going to have detailed thoughts about this meeting I have to lead tomorrow. And anything I might come to, I'll get to in 2 minutes when I sit down tomorrow morning and work on it anyways. You know, we think we scratch this emotional itch by trying to do so many things at the same time. And the reality is we're just doing really crappy work in the back of our mind versus just being fully present to the thing in front of us. Sorry, I have strong opinions about this.
No, I agree with them. So,
Never
like
apologize for strong opinions. This is good.
yeah. So, what advice do you give people who are on the verge, who already are burned out?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question.
Rochelle took a quiz a few months ago and was more burned out than she thought. So,
Oh no.
and I would
I
say
thought I was
I'm right there
totally
today.
fine.
So,
Totally fine. I was like, bring on this quiz. I'm gonna ace it. I'm 100% human. And the quiz was like, you are burnt to a little crispy. You should take a break.
Oh no. You'll have to send me that one, Rochelle. I'd love to see it. You know, I think the key idea here, Jeff, is that we are 100% responsible for what we're getting from our relationship with time. We're not time prisoners as much as we feel like it sometimes. Like we ultimately have agency in a in a free market economy. We ultimately have agency. We choose where we're spending time. And so I think if you are nearing burnout or burnt out, I think you have to make a change to your habits in 911 emergency. I think you have, because the reality is, let's say you're burnt out or you have burnt out. Again, you go back to work, and if you haven't changed your underlying habits related to time, it's just inevitable. It's going to build up again. You can take everything off your plate. You could literally delete your calendar, and the same habits that led you to feel overwhelmed the first time are going to lead you to feel overwhelmed again. So, you know, we mentioned it earlier, vacation is not going to solve your problems. A job change is not going to solve your problems. A marriage change is not going to solve your problems. Whatever, you choose the variable that you think you're going to shift, but the same person and your same habits is going to show up in the next environment. And so I think people have to get really serious about changing their habits and changing their approach to time.
I always talk about how the grass is greener until we realize that we're the ones who are taking care of the grass.
Absolutely. I love the phrase, the grass is greener where you water it. You have agency. And you have to, I think adulthood begins when you take 100% responsibility for your life, and time is no different.
Yeah. Well, thanks for bantering with us today, Andrew.
So fun. I love this conversation.
This has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been very helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, great to spend time with you both for sure.
A friendly reminder to our listeners, if you have a burning question, you can email it to us at burnoutbanter@gmail.com. Please remember to like or subscribe to the podcast on Amazon, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you are interested in managing your time better, keep an eye out for Andrew's monthly Time Boss Weekly Operating System Masterclass. You can also learn more about Andrew and his business at timeboss.us. And if you want more information specifically on the masterclass, it's timeboss.us/masterclass, correct? Yes?
Correct.
Perfect. And finally, if you are going to be at SMPS SERC in Greenville, South Carolina later in March, or SMPS Northeastern Regional Conference in Boston in April, connect with Jeff and I there. We're doing workshops at both conferences. And Jeff is also going to be doing a workshop on our relationship with technology at AEC TechCon in St. Louis on May 1st and 2nd.
You have anywhere people can find you, Andrew, or any speaking you're doing or anything?
Just doing lots of podcasts right now. Masterclass is a great place to check out. And then we do a lot on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's the primary place that people might find me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. Thanks again for being here, and we'll see you all next month.
Awesome. Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
That's great. Thank you.